Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, hi everyone. Welcome to Nom Watch Review, part of Nom Talk Network. On this show, we review the latest film drop or throwback celebrating a milestone while eating and drinking our favorite movie snacks and drinks. I'm your host, Alejandro, and right now I am enjoying my adult, what I call movie snacks here. So this is a little trio of very colorful treats here with a little Pocky and a lot of gelatin snacks like crazy. And yeah, goldfish. It's all things that the healthy grown man needs, along with a little shameless plug. Coca-Cola, sponsor us, please. But here I am joined by a great friend of mine and great co-host here. This is Derrick. Say hello, my friend.
Hello, everyone. How are you? I'm very excited to be back. I am drinking my nighttime adult beverage of a mango passion fruit. Only featured in Seattle, by the way. It's the only place that you can get it. I happen to have a hookup. So if you're ever in Seattle and looking for a very special adult beverage, definitely check them out. They're pretty great.
You said passion mango?
Well, this one is a mango passion fruit, and it's by a company called Mojo.
Right on. Right
and
on.
they are exclusive to Seattle. I think they're moving into Portland a little bit, but really right now the only place you can get them is Seattle. So.
Heck yeah, right on.
And they're delicious.
That sounds delicious, man. I'm already like, I was already like, just salivating at the mouth. I was like, oh, man, that sounds really good.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Well, so tonight we are going to be discussing today Event Horizon. Personally, this film creeped me the hell out when I first saw it. Derrick, I have to already start into this. We'll go right into it in general. I have to ask you initially your interaction with this film. When did you first see it and your initial response?
Yeah, man. So I actually saw this movie when I was way too young. This movie, I actually hadn't rewatched this movie in probably close to 20 years. We did it recently, like in the last couple of years, revisit it, and it doesn't have the same effect. But I saw this movie when I was maybe, it was 97, so I was probably like 15 years old, and it was like a challenge, right? Everybody that I knew that had seen it, that had parents that let them watch R-rated movies, we're like, oh, it's the scariest movie you'll ever watch. Like, don't watch it alone. And I was like, please, I got this. So sure enough, I watched Event Horizon at 15 years old, alone in the dark, downstairs by myself with no comfort and watched this grotesque, violent movie about a ship from hell. And I have never been the same.
Oh my god, I just realized you just said that. I just thought about the movie Ghost Ship. Oh my
god.
No. I'm gonna have to discuss this later with you.
Oh.
Damn it. God. Okay. That's funny. I will have to tell you similar story, a little vibe myself. I'm probably around the same age, give or take 3 or 4 years. And honestly, I wanted to say it was TNT Monster Vision, like almost every 31 of my other previous scary movies that I've seen with the show, but it was more along the lines of, I remember it was the older guys I was hanging out with, and they're like, hey, you want to see, do you like space? I was like, yes, it's great. They're like, do you like astronauts? Like, yeah. And like, do you like scary stuff? And I was like, I don't know. And I was trying to be positive about it and whatever. So we now sat down and watched this damn movie. And the funny thing is that this movie confused me at first because, and we'll talk about this later too as well, I thought this was Hellraiser initially when I saw it because I didn't remember the introduction to the film itself. And I just remembered vivid, crazy shots that this produced, such of the barbed wire and the constant gothic / futuristic, concepts of, geometric and mechanical blood. And I was like, whatever. That's all I remembered from this thing because I was traumatized as shit. And I remember I didn't get to finish it initially. And so I bailed out. I forgot because I think my mom had to pick me up from this house. And I took off, and it stuck with me. And people kept on saying, eventually as I got more into horror, people were like, have you seen Hellraiser? Have you seen Hellraiser? So I confused this movie with Hellraiser for at least 5 to 10 years of my life.
That is amazing. Yeah. And just FYI, Mab, who's one of the best editor-in-chiefs of Nerdbot, greatest nerd website in the world, you should absolutely go check it out. She has a theory, a headcanon theory, that the core in Event Horizon is actually a Hellraiser puzzle box. And that's what the ship is. And so it is actually, it can fit into the Hellraiser canon.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah.
Dude, that just blew my mind.
Right?
Because like
doesn't it just work? Like it just works.
Yeah, because like honestly, because it actually takes them to another dimension. And oh man, spoiler alert, we'll talk about this because this show is going to be a little ping pong back and forth here. But it would take them to an alternate dimension, whereas exactly this dimension seems to be, concept of pain, which in Hellraiser they do mention the concept of pain and never the concept of hell. So yeah that would work. That was. Yep. I like that.
Yep. When she told me that the last time we had talked about this movie, she told me that it's truth. It's fact now for me. Like I've no argument, no notes. That is the best headcanon theory I've ever heard.
You have, oh my God. We got to talk about that. Oh, we definitely got to talk about them more. Okay. So, all right. So in this point, we understand. Okay. Oh my Lord. All right. So in the beginning of this initial film, we have, obviously in this era of time travel that we understand, or in this, I would say, universe, that the speed of light is obviously theoretical, but it actually can travel at a distance, not just in time. So
also we're only 25 years away from when Event Horizon takes place.
Exactly. Oh, Lord.
So we got a lot of work to do, guys.
tons. Or they have started stuff, and this is low key not telling us.
That's maybe true.
I know, true. Right? Oh Lord! So in this era they have going on, right? So technically speaking, they're going to the outer belts of Neptune, and in the early beginning of this movie, it mentions the fact that the ship is called the Event Horizon, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So this ship goes on mission, unknown to most, and technically disappears. Just gone, poosh. And then, so in the lore and theory amongst the world right now, it's technically destroyed and dead. Fast forward, you have this now ship Discovery crew that is now on an emergency mission. You have Dr. I know him, Dr. Grant. It's on the ship. You have just Morpheus and his crew.
He's just crazy Dr. Grant. That's it. That's all he is. He's just like the evil Dr. Grant doppelganger. Like that's
I know, right? Easily. Now, I have to ask you, in the beginning of the film, and I'll definitely respond here. What was your initial response? Like the story that was presented to you in the 20 seconds that initially happened, and the introduction of, I'd say, the first 20 minutes of the film, the vibe of it, in regards to even the cast itself. How did you initially feel about it?
Yeah, I actually think this is one of the strengths of Event Horizon. I actually think the movie is a bit front loaded. So as much as I like, when things get a little crazy and it gets a little horrific, and we start to kind of uncover all the things that what this actually is, and the kind of supernatural, interdimensional, violent mystery. I think it works kind of, but it's not the most interesting part. I think the idea that you and the audience, or you as the audience member and the crew, know just as much about Event Horizon as together, right? They don't have any other information than what you're given. So all of their experiences on this ship, as things start to get weirder and weirder and weirder, and they their own rescue ship gets destroyed and they have to go onto this Event Horizon. It all feels like it's a series of bad events that happen in space. But the atmosphere that I'd say the whole first act, probably the whole first half of the movie, the atmosphere that it creates within those first 45 minutes, where we don't really know what's going on, they don't know what's going on, but something really, really bad is going on. I think that is probably the best portion of this entire movie. And when you talk about Paul W.S. Anderson, it is hands down the most patient I think he's ever been when it comes to really unfolding the story, letting the atmosphere breathe. And that's what makes this movie so frightening. I actually don't even think it's the violence that got left on the cutting room floor or anything like that. It's you and them trying to uncover the mystery at the same time. Like that to me is just, I love the whole first act of this movie. I think it's probably its best for sure.
It's great you should say that too as well, because as you're saying this, and it's funny because little bits and pieces, like initially you mentioned, the ghost ship in space, and now the concept of like how the delivery from him in general, because we're looking at Paul S. Anderson as like what we're looking at, like Mortal Kombat, we're looking at all the Resident Evils. I mean, there's a lot of fast-paced sci-fi, blood gore, quickly to the point, like chop them, get up and going. And in points, you're like, wait a minute, there's plot holes here and there. But in general, I do enjoy a lot of his colorful deliveries, or how, in regards to that action pace, it always seems modern. Even like his past stuff still seems modern in a sense to me. But that being said, as much as I was terrified as a kid, I got to swing around as an adult and actually watch this a few times. And because one, confusion on it was like, hey, this is what I thought was Hellraiser. I'm like, no, hold on, wait a minute. You actually know this is what, this was Event Horizon. I was like, what? So, this pace coming into it, I was initially like really interested. You hit the nail on the head, though. I was surprised that in that little paragraph and a half, what they tell you, and then your introduction to knowing that, okay, we can evidently travel to Neptune and Mars, and evidently, there's people in colonies where you actually get to enjoy time, space, but at the same time, they are now, what we know, are surrounded by nothingness, absolute dark space, and terror. So getting to this initial interaction, it seems like there's just enough story pacing and just enough jump scares in the beginning to be like a happy medium. You don't really think about it. I didn't really think about it. You just mentioned it now. I will say that the introduction pacing reminds me a little bit of Alien in general, of them going onto the ships, right? Yeah. But at the same time, you get enough of that in-depth, I would say, explanation that I would say even somewhat. I know we're not going to compare it really script by script to what I would joke around to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So that's initial 20 or so minutes. You have enough dialogue, like, oh, okay, now we understand that these people are living through this, initial, I would say, experience. Yeah. Also, I want to mention this there because I was looking on IMDb and a couple things about it. I didn't realize, and visually to me, rewatching, because I rewatched it just about a day ago, and the uniforms and just the like costume design and just the set was just in depth. It was really good. And like looking on some, I guess, I don't know if you noticed, but on the patches, you'll see similar things from the Australian Union or from United States, UN. And the interesting thing is that they purposely made these flight suits to go inside with current governments to work with pilots and engineers. And they altered the tags and made theoretical unions from local nations, and they made them represent them from who they are. And I was like, what the hell? And looking back, I was like, they actually did that. So it's like one of those things where I think initially now we're getting a cult following and people are liking this show a lot more after reruns, right? So for digressing too much, you got the initial, interaction coming in. We understand that now that they are trying to salvage a ship with some unknown origins to it. We initially just get sideswiped with obvious introduction. We're in this, like your background shows it right now, this huge metallic room that's why I get confused with Hellraiser, and a couple of things in general, just geometric shapes and just eerie but futuristic concepts of just what to me looked like ancient lore at one time being. Then we find out that we're going to call him Space Dr. Grant was like, hey, yo, this is actually my design, this is what I've done. But that initial concept of that gel movement of the was it the reactor, the gravity reactor, whatever it is. Right when Homeboy puts it in, they call him Baby Bear, a nickname. When he put his hand in, I'm like, why put your freaking hand in a portal? Like if anybody in existence, even if you don't like watch horror movies, you don't put your hand in an unknown. Like I don't. Am I wrong? Or
no, it's such a bad sci-fi trope. So I want to touch on two things. So one, when you were talking about kind of openings and how this movie compares, the other movie that came to mind, and this one does it significantly better for much longer. But I'm reminded of The Descent because everything that is truly terrifying about The Descent isn't actually what happens when they get into the cave. It's them going through the cave and realizing they have no way back. Like that is everything about that. Like the creatures that show up, they're like the least of my worries. Like that movie taps into its fear, but it also is another movie that literally creates these real life sets, right? It creates these big, giant, elaborate sets. And you feel that in Event Horizon. And even though some of the, larger effects don't really hold up anymore, because everything is so practical and you are truly on board the Event Horizon with these people, I think it just adds again to that atmosphere of just this creep factor. And then going back to the point that you just made, you go into this gigantic, strange core that like, no, you've never seen a design like this. And it's real, and it's a practical set that moves. And so when it turns into this gravity portal, yes, it's a horrible science trope, right? Science fiction loves to do stuff like that. Every time, the biggest offender, I mean, they all do it, but the biggest offender is Prometheus.
Yeah.
Where
we did a show a couple of weeks ago.
The whole time they're walking through the cave, they're like, don't touch anything, don't look at anything, just do your research and get back to the ship. And then all of a sudden a little snake or whatever it is. Sorry, I was gonna curse, but
no, go ahead.
a little phallic snake monster comes up from the water, and the guy's like, ooh, I just gotta touch it. And I'm like, what are you doing? Why is
come here,
happening?
Beautiful? He says, come here. Like, what the
fuck? So yeah, Baby Bear touching the gravity thing. It's very light. It's very akin to that, but not as egregious, right? Because there's a bit more of a wonder here, and I think it's an almost forgivable cliche because of how we are experiencing the things on the ship. Like, things are escalating, and you can write it off as him just being like mesmerized or curious or just dumbfounded, or even the ship telling him to touch it, right? Like, there's some of that going on, but yeah, it's a very, very common trope in science fiction for sure.
Oh, I'm gonna hop back to the comments here real quick here, because I want to go into the chat here and say hello to some of our viewers here. So we have Q in the house. What is Q? We also have Michael here as well. Q says, I meant to say, let's see here. I want to go up here. All right, so Q mentioned previously, I'm not going to spoil Sandman with or anything, but I watched the series, and it's just, let's say I meant to say the final finale, and I'm shook. So he's kind of making some references previously from our shows talking about the Sandman. Along here as well, Q jokes around, making reference previously earlier, Derrick, when you mentioned you were scared. He says, "Did you pee on the couch, Derrick?" Just joking, kidding.
I really might have. I was so scared.
And he also says, "I can get scared easy, and if there's a crazy kill scene or a jump scares, I would thought I'd have an asthma attack." I feel you there, buddy. It gets intense with the jump scares, for sure, with some of this stuff here. But yeah, oh my Lord. Yeah, the whole classic cliche in regards to like the opening scenes and like, what's going on? What's the initial interaction? So you're right. This Prometheus the same way. And then he literally like, come here, beautiful. That thing comes at him, and the same concept. It's like, let me stick my hand in the cold, dark, metallic liquid. And what happens? Sucker gets grabbed and he gets sucked in right at this point. Yep. I think the only smart people, in my opinion, and for the record, before I go into this, they do so well in regards to going against what you initially think the jump scares would be. So, for example, you would have that interaction where there's been plenty of like camera focusing on one area and the thing actually happening behind them. It's not necessarily a kill. It's like a spark of light or an explosion. And you're like, oh shit, you just get jumped by the fact that they're being scared too. So the fact that you mentioned that we feel as if we're in the ship, we're actually experiencing things with them that you mentioned before. We get experiences of their scares as well. And that's one thing that scares the shit out of me, because we eventually find out now that once that Baby Bear gets pulled in the portal, he gets technically saved temporarily, coming into the concept, and we now start to see parts of the actual, multiple, crew members, or two per se, getting hints of, we'd say, voices or PTSD like memories, and which is crazy because you oh my God, I want to bring up this point here because you mentioned it. We get this crazy huge open space, and yet they do an excellent job on, so when you typically think about a lot of, I would say, horror-like genre scenes in space, or initially in just the horror genre in general, everything's condensed. If something's coming at you, you're in vents, you're crawling really quickly, you're coming into close, tight spaces. There's a lot of things depending on certain camera angles that get you, and yet there's so much open space in this damn movie, and you don't feel safe. Like, even in the fucking med rooms that you're actually there, in which there's brief moments of, they said, hey, do you have what do you claustrophobia, and he's like, talk to, he's like, yeah, a little bit. He puts him in there, but in reality he experiences it maybe for 10 seconds, and then the rest of it is an open space, and yet there's no place to be safe. And
Yeah.
I think, once again, I want to go back to what your point you brought earlier is they do so well of the camera work into perspective of you actually being the actual individual. And I will say that the movie initially got some bad rap. We're looking at something that was a $60 million budget, and it only technically hit $28 million in the States and got quick public release because Paramount was scared and reached another, I think it was like 16.7, which made it about just a little bit of 40 million. So they were still like 20 million short in that aspects. But
and it got trounced by critics too. It was
God.
Critics did not like the. I think it's at like a 29% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah. The only thing right now, the public rating is the IMDb rating. That's a 6.7 a 10. That's the largest one right now. Like you said, Rotten Tomatoes got a 36%. There's other people that have 15 or 20%. But the initial thing is the same old in regards to release dates. Initially, what happened was, I believe it was Titanic was not going to be released at the expected date that it was supposed to be, and there was so much money invested in it, and they were using and reaching out to all their smaller projects, quote unquote, and pushing them out early releases. And essentially, they cut this. I think, was it a year? They cut it a year early release. This thing came out a year early ahead of time, and honestly, I think they did still a pretty damn good job with it.
I think they did, and they gutted it by. I mean, they gutted almost an hour out of this movie.
Did they?
Yeah, dude. This movie. So Event Horizon is actually closer to being about an hour. It's closer to being about 2.5 hours. Like the original cut that he had submitted. Obviously, that was still going to get edited down a little bit.
Yeah.
But there's a good hour of this movie that got put on the cutting room floor for release because Paramount was like, no, this is too violent. You can't do this. You can't do this. You can't do this. No one's going to watch this movie. Like they really gutted this film. And then when it developed a cult following years later, they actually did try to go back and restore some of that stuff in there. But because so much time had passed, a lot of that film and a lot of those originals had been lost or destroyed. So they were never able to actually put the whole movie together the way that he wanted. And so when you think about that, like I'm not going to sit here and tell you like release the Anderson cut. I'm not that guy. I like the movie that we got. But it is interesting that this movie even still makes sense, in any way. It's considering all the hurdles that it had, and the fact that we probably never would have seen this movie. Honestly, it's a miracle that this movie even got released, let alone made. It's pretty wild, man, how this movie came to be.
And that makes so much sense what you're saying too as well, because initially when I in regards to the profit, so technically speaking, it was already ready, set, and go, as you said previously going in, and they technically got past the majority of, I believe it was like producers and official headwigs at Paramount, right? Supposedly there's about 10 of them that haven't saw it yet, and they watched the pre-release like screening, and supposedly 4 of them fainted in the middle of it because it was too grotesque. So that's where the pressure of cutting, I didn't know this, and that makes sense to me now, to do a lot of cuts. And evidently that makes sense to me because I didn't know that much of it was cut. Evidently,
that little hell orgy scene is like 10 minutes long.
Oh, like, maybe we got lucky about it.
Yeah, it's not little video clips that you don't really get to know what's going on. He filmed this crazy, bizarre Hellraiser death orgy. Yeah. Yeah.
Dude, that was intense, bro. I didn't expect that. Like, out of the whole movie, that 10 seconds was the hardest for me. No, I will say, I was like,
it's rough.
What the hell? Oh my God. But and the crazy thing about it was, so evidently he was working on a film, or Anderson was working on a film with Jeff Bridges a while back, and he said we were talking about the bad reviews they were getting about Event Horizon, and Jeff Bridges looked at him and said, look, he goes, it's going to be a great film in about 10 years time. Promise. It's going to have a cult following. And the funny thing is that at the initial release they did, once they pulled it out, fanboys like us, we just started hopping on, right away, and just wanted to watch this thing. And it got so much profit from international sales that they reached out to Anderson and asked him, hey, can we have the other film that you had read it? You can do it, go ahead and do it. And his response was, and this makes your people saying them deleting the film. He goes, you made me delete so much, and I had to get it out, and I had nowhere to store it. I don't know where it's at. I can't give it to you. If I would have, and evidently they were looking at some big profit too. Yep. That could possibly happen for that too as well. Yep.
Yeah.
Oh man. So here we are now, constantly in this point of the film. We now understand that, this film is possibly possessed with, Dr. Grant hearing which looks like possible love interest, because it doesn't really announce it quite yet.
Yeah.
Keeps on, calling his name, you do actually have the doctor herself that's in there, their med specialist over there, trauma specialist or med specialist. She at the time being is seeing what looks like her son because he initially sees it. But man, the effects that they show on the son, and there was initial CGI on the eyes that threw me off a little bit because I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. But honestly, at the time being, that didn't bug me. That scared the crap out of me. So, to me, I was still one thing, that I want to definitely bring up was the actual practical effects. There's a decent amount. I mean, honestly, it looks like 90% of it in my eyes, and there might, correct me if I'm wrong, but it actually, I was surprised for the 90s, what's going on for, what we had and what we worked with. So
there's something to be said about, and this kind of ties in a little bit to what I just watched, but I am genuinely starting to miss the blend of practical effects and digital effects. Some of my favorite movies to come out this year that kind of lean in, operate in that space. Everything Everywhere All at Once is a great example that, it's this massive blend of purely visual effects, but they do so many practical things that blend is just, you just miss it from cinema. And some of that is just the marble gloss. And I get it. You're dealing with all kinds of multiverses and stuff like that. So sure, everything's going to be glossy, but I just watched House of the Dragon, and I genuinely enjoy. I'm not going to spoil anything.
No, go ahead. Go.
I genuinely enjoyed it, but the stark difference between. Sorry, I'm 12. The stark difference between the things that they were doing previously to what they're doing now, where yes, Game of Thrones originally had a gigantic budget, but it didn't have the budget it has now. So they were forced to work with practical effects and, kind of, mitigate a lot of that stuff. Where here they have an endless supply of money. They can make the most expensive episodes they want, but all that translates into is just visual effects, just bad, poor visual effects that just don't look good. And so to your point, when you work with a film like this, where it's only a $60 million budget and they're incredibly constrained and they can't hire gigantic visual effects studios to, do that, it is actually cheaper and more efficient to just create practical effects and just create practical sets. And I think that is one of the strengths of this movie. Obviously, Paul W. Sanderson would go on to never use practical effects again. But at least we know at one point in his career, he was all about it.
This trio of Resident Evils and God, and I'm making fun of it, and yet here I am laughing at myself because I love Resident Evil for what it is. I hate that I like some of it.
I do too. If you guys, anybody listening, if you guys want to blame someone for why they keep making these films, it is 100% my fault.
I'll take. I'm with you.
Yeah. When somebody asks who keeps watching these movies, it's me. It's me.
Like freaking Derrick and Alejandro keep buying these damn tickets and go stop watching them. Stop buying the Blu-ray After Effects disc. What are you doing? You why do you need physical copies? We have digital media. Why are you buying both? Because we want it.
Yeah. They're not good. I'm not defending it at all. But I genuinely love them. But yeah, it you're absolutely right. The practical effects in this movie, I think just the big giant sets, I think they're done really, really well. And for something that could be heavily reliant on just outright visual effects. I mean, you're doing a haunted house movie in space. That's essentially what this is when you strip it down to its bare bones. And that premise alone just lends itself to digital effects. It just screams digital effects. That's what you'd want to do. But instead, he chooses to build the event horizon essentially. And that just instantly creates a better haunting atmosphere. And you're right, when those things start happening, when they start hearing the voices, when they start seeing the hallucinations, when the ship starts to feel more alive, more and more and more. Again, when you talk about the camera angles, that's such a great thing to bring up, because we're not there. The villain is the ship. Like the ship is what is possessed. And so when you're looking for things to do, I know. But when you're looking for things to freak you out, it's the ship turning on lights. It's the ship shutting doors. It's the ship opening lock chambers. Like it's the ship literally coming to life to essentially kill these people. And it's just that kind of stuff, I think, is where this movie is really, really strong. And I think it does a good job in doing that, because it knows where to kind of find its haunts and jump scares for the large part of the film. Like I said, I think towards the end, when we just go full on supernatural horror, I do think it loses its way a little bit. It breaks away from the practical, gets into all digital, gets a little wonky.
I think find the Hellfire snuff tapes. That's Hellfire snuff tapes. I meant to say Hellraiser.
No, it's now Hellfire sex tapes. If I learned anything from this show, that's it. That's my takeaway. Success. It's Hellfire sex tapes. That's my review. No notes. 3.5 out of 5 popcorn buckets.
Exactly. I was going to get to that. So you and I both see this film as a 3.5 out of 5 popcorn buckets here. And initially this is why I actually go ahead. This is where the 3.5 comes in per se. The storytelling, like you said, it initially quick in the beginning, nice, sufficient enough of information, puts you in a nice environment. We are brought to a situation which you typically think it'd be difficult, given wide space. Now we're terrified of the situation because we understand that's like, discovering this lore, discovering the ship, as you said. So it's this huge open ship with massive possibilities here. And it's a lot of strategic scares that we start to see. And then, we obviously see a lot of blood and gore in regards to PTS memories of, we're looking at Miller too. I'm going to call him Morpheus, as well too. But Peter's, in regards to her being, the major doctor, as well. But the thing about it is that all this being said, they do a job of comedic aspects of Cooper, played by Richard T. Jones, in there as well. And I'm happy that he seems to be the guy with sense in most of the film, in regards to reactions and what to do and how to do it. But fast forward a little bit here, because I don't guess too much. We are now discovering the fact that this ship has pretty much just fucked with everybody mentally, and bringing up the fact that these altered dimensions, we find out the ship travels in space light years away, because it takes, the concept of reality of physics, the quickest distance between two objects being, a straight line. But in this way, it's not that case. It takes it folded in half, in which I finally understand how it understood time travel in a sense was this damn movie. It scared the crap out of me.
First time I ever heard the concept. Time. And I know it's a pretty common sci-fi trope of how to explain time travel. But that's the first. I will never forget when he folds a piece of paper and puts the pencil through it, and I was like, oh, that's how that works. Yeah, okay, sure.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's the same thing. Like the simple concept of that, right? It just happened to me, and I was like, and I never, as much as I, was terrified of the film, it actually put me enough at a position now to be like, oh, okay, this is, that explains to me. It stuck with me as a kid that, okay, there's a lot of blood and gore, and that's how that travel concept works. So you get that concept of reality, what the ship is, because we also have, Space Grant talking about the concept of, of the concept of being real, because half the crew is in disbelief. We see the ship now went into another universe, which we're going to call it the Hellraiser universe, because I like Mabs' theory. I dig that. And so this universe seems to be based off of pain and destruction. So it then altered and got connected with ours. And now we have the ship that's possessed with this, I would say, soul entity like thing, right? So now we have Baby Bear that had a tragic incident. He went back out because his body was possessed, and he got himself to go ahead and pretty much kill himself, decompressed air, coming back slightly alive with explosions of guts, internal nastiness. So
that's such a gross scene too.
Oh God,
it's so gross.
The floating eye thing. I just
it's so good. It's so good.
Lord, part of it too, the fact that part of me is like, telling him, cover your eyes, like as Miller's saying this. And he's doing, like, I don't know if he's doing his best. I'm not ever stuck out in space having a situation. And I'm hoping I never had this situation in my life. I will die happy knowing I would never have to die this way. So, but the concept, it just, oh, you're right. They do it so well too, because once again, a nice mixture of CGI and practical effects in that situation, because it hits a little bit of CGI in regard to his eyes, then it goes to practical effects when you see the actual lacerations and so forth, mixing his blood with the CGI. So now we have people technically, dying left and right. And at this point, I think my argument with the storyline is the fact of what entity owns a ship. How did it take it over? Like, what's so massive that could take a ship that that works off of gravity and black holes? And and this is the part where I got confused. Like, yes, I understand that it explained a time travel concept to me, and I thought that was amazing, and I understood gravity concept. But what got to me, and the reason why I kind of went down on it per se, was one, the quick interaction that was the middle of the movie, in my opinion. That yes, there was these deaths that were happening. Yes, they did excellent at scaring the crap out of people, but I thought the pacing was fast. Now, by all means, I'm totally okay with being wrong, but was there anything that bugged you the most that at this midpoint here?
Yeah, I think when it starts to try, the only thing I would disagree with, but I think we actually come to the same conclusion, is for me, I actually think the more the film tries to explain itself, and the more it tries to explain what's actually happening to us, I actually think is where it loses its footing, because we're so invested in the mystery, right? We are aware that something is not right with the ship. The ship is quite possibly alive. Or if not, wherever it traveled to, it has brought something mysterious back. And we don't know what that is. We don't know what that could be. But all we really need to know is that it shouldn't be here. Like, it shouldn't be in this world, and it has now used this vehicle of this ship to enter into our world, and it wants to bring things back. If we had never tried to go beyond that, right? Like, because I use the terminology hell, but the film kind of leans towards that. Like, that's kind of where it is, or a hell plane, or whatever. It has kind of this muddied, watered, like half-baked, undercooked type of explanation for it, where I almost think it would be better and even more haunting if, like, we just never know where the hell the ship went and what it brought back with it. But all we know is that it shouldn't be here, and we shouldn't interact with this thing at all. Send that shit back. Like, it doesn't matter what it is. We don't want it here at all. And to me, I think that functions a little bit better. And then again, I agree with you on the pacing. I think it really does kind of go from this slow burn, terrifying ghost ship in space, to kind of this just out of nowhere, like, body parts and death and violence and exposition, and like, everything just kind of explodes all at once, and you're like, whoa, I was enjoying the atmosphere. What the heck just happened?
Yeah, no, it's funny. It's excellent, because I never really thought about that per se. And it would have been interesting to have a little bit more of a less to be continued, situation to it in sense. And honestly, I know maybe this is just the cheesy, nerdy part of me, hoping that there's technically an escape vessel that could mystically be in space and like kind of throw you seen the movie oh my god, Ghost of Mars?
Not in a very long time.
So they kind of have the same possession concept, but it takes over people individually. So hypothetically speaking, if there was a escape pod with a body that kind of went over this, and maybe we can have a Event Horizon 2.
Yeah. there is a TV show in development, actually.
Yes, and they had to cancel that sucker because of temporarily, not like it's not like canceled for good, but I understand they had to stop a little bit in regards to finances on that one too as well. Yeah. Well, it'd be great to see them on Paramount Plus though. Maybe
I think it's Prime.
That's right. You're totally right.
Yeah, I think
you're totally
it's supposed to be Amazon Prime.
Oh, and before I forget here too as well, because a lot on time here as well. So looking at some of the comments, so Q mentions before, says, I'm not buying that Paramount lost some of the scenes from the original cut. They got them hid away somewhere. Hey, that's a pretty good theory. We have Jordan who says, hey, Alejandro, hi, Derrick. I love this film. It reminds me of an early Pandorum, where it only takes a little of the influence in some historian to make a great space horror film. It's Jordan, by the way. This a missing creatures, but it didn't need it because humans were the ultimate ones to get drawn into this hell. Which, dude, that's like an excellent point. Like, and that capitalizes on the concept of Derrick mentioning the open space concept of the fact that there's not really anything there. Like, yes, we obviously see the Hellraiser like blood and gore situation, but there's a good 20 to 30 minutes that is just the individual itself and their mind in open space. Like, even the concept when they go ahead and crawl into the vents themselves are not just tiny vents, they're pretty massive. And it kind of reminded me of the movie The Cube with the metallic green lights on it and everything as well too. So it was bright, but the moment they shut those lights off, you're like, it doesn't matter how much space that is, it's dark in there. I don't like that at all. So, bringing up towards the end here before we forget here. So I do think that the ending, I wish that, maybe there's, possible continuation. You did mention the show earlier. That'd be kind of fun to see how far they could actually, get with this. Now,
to be fair, I actually wouldn't even mind it being kind of like a From Dusk Till Dawn situation where it's basically the retelling of the film itself, but it's drawn out with more world building, more lore, more characters. So you get this cast and crew that come together. So it's almost like a one-off type of thing. But you just kind of remake Event Horizon, but all the strengths that we talked about, you get to stretch them out over, a couple more episodes. So then you can correct some of those mistakes in the end where things kind of start to draw out a little bit. You can get not necessarily more violent, but definitely more haunting. And I think more unsettling and kind of more disturbing. And, to Jordan's point, I think that's where you can really start to dive into the underlying concept of, oh, it's us. We're actually the villains. All it takes is a little push. It takes a little hallucination, a little mystery, and going to start eating each other alive. Like that's, I don't think Event Horizon does that as well as it wants to. I think that's what it's trying to come across, but I don't think it comes across as well as it wants. But in a televised series of Event Horizon, you can expand on that by a lot and really dive into this concept of kind of the ghost ship meets Lord of the Flies, which is perfect for a haunted sci-fi film. Like it just absolutely is. So I would actually like to see that get put together. I would hope that that's what they're trying to do.
If they did that, and honestly, build up that concept, that'd be fantastic. So technically speaking, because the end of the ship does go in a thing called a black hole. When people think of black holes, hypothetically speaking, they think of nothingness. In theoretical terms, black holes suck things into it. We just don't know where they spit it out. So that's theoretical. We don't know where it's going. So it'd be interesting if they did a continuation of some part of the random universe. It took this hunk of ship that's out there, and that'd be great. That'd be fantastic. But anyway, before we run out of time, I want to go ahead and thank everyone for actually joining in with us, talking about Event Horizon today. Derrick, thank you for being a great guest on the show, as usual, being very informative, just being great to talk to about this. We always love you having the show. Guys, now question for you, before I tune out here, I might have to say I might want to change my rating. Are you still pretty much a strong 3.5? Because personally, I'm going to have to put up to a 4. And it's okay. It's okay if you want to stay, but
that's fair. No, I totally get you. I'm going to hold firm at 3.5. I can see an argument to be made for 4 though. This movie is, I think it's better than people give it credit for. I think that you can. I think most of the flaws and most of the critiques are absolutely true. I'm not discounting any of the criticisms.
No, totally, yeah.
I think most of the criticisms, even the harshest ones, are pretty fair. But I really believe that this movie has more strengths than weaknesses. And I think those strengths overshadow it a little bit. And so I giving credence to those flaws, I got to keep it at a 3.5. But I enjoy the hell out of this movie, man. I think this movie is just absolutely wonderful. It's just a fun little cult horror classic. I love it. So
heck yeah. No, I agree with you. The only thing I had to go because we kept on talking about practical effects, and practical effects got me to move it up a little bit. Because yes, even though it's a Gladden door,
that's a worthy point bump for sure.
Yeah, I was like, all right, I have to do it a little bit. It's the only thing I'm kind of cruising on in general. But before we actually go to outro, Derrick, do you have any social media accounts people could keep update up to date with you with. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good. No, absolutely, guys. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at DRock Comedy. It's DROK Comedy. You can find me on Facebook if you're still there. Just my name, Derrick Murray. You can also find me on nerdbot.com. I'm a film critic for them, and I do writing all the time. It's a great website, great nerd news, and I do tons of reviews, pretty much anything that's new. And when I have the time to do it, I try to knock it out. So definitely check those out.
Yes, definitely check those reviews. Very informative, very fun, and spot on a lot of ratings, in my opinion, my friend. So definitely check Derrick out in the reviews and just great stuff. Now that's all the time we have talked about today in regards to Event Horizon. Guys, thank you for tuning in. Make sure to join our Discord to keep the conversation going, as well as subscribing to our platforms. All of them are going to be at Nom Talk Network. Shout out again, once again, guest Derrick. I really appreciate, my friend. In regards to Nom Watch Review and Basic Binges are in podcast form. You can listen to them wherever you get your podcasts. Please tune into our next show. Until then, I'm your host, Alejandro Cowie. No, you can also find me here and the social media accounts on Instagram. I am Cowie and Crimson Cowie himself. Once again, you guys have a fantastic night. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day.